Coming to Vietnam for the 23-year journey in classical music.
I got to Vietnam and discovered all this wonderful music.
Where the passion for music becomes reality.
All this is, I think, only possible in Vietnam.
And the efforts to contribute to the local classical music scene appreciated.
They all held up signs with the word thank you in different languages.
British conductor Graham Sutcliffe.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Talk Vietnam. Now, for many classical music lovers here in Vietnam, they have been stunned by the decision of British conductor Graham Sutcliffe to leave Vietnam after 23 years of being devoted to the classical music scene here in Vietnam. Now, his bidding farewell ended with a concert that was focused on the theme of love in opera, featuring an elective mix of showpieces throughout the periods of classical music. Now, in this edition of Talk Vietnam, we're very lucky to have Graham here in our studio in order to talk more about his passion for classical music here in Vietnam, but above all, his love for the land people and the music scene here in the country.
Conductor Graham Sutcliffe and the Vietnam Opera and Ballet VNOB played to rapturous applause once again at the Hanoi Opera House.
He's great, really. He seemed to have the orchestra in the palm of his hand. Everybody was looking at him rather than the music.
Entitled Aspects of Love, this final performance by Mr. Sutcliffe before leaving Vietnam was highly charged with energy and emotion, turning it into one of the most memorable performances for both artist and audience.
It was amazing. I've only been in Hanoi for 4 months, and I can't believe that there's such an amazing art culture here, and that there's a whole set of people, a whole set of performances here that that everyone can come and watch.
As a final farewell at the end of the show, the choir and orchestra surprised Graham with Hallelujah, which had been kept off the playlist and was a genuine surprise to the talented conductor who has spent the last 2 decades dedicating himself to Vietnamese classical music.
Hello, Graham.
Hi,
Yes,
nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, how did you feel upon this last night of the concert, bidding farewell to 23 years of spending here in the country?
Yes, of course, it was a very emotional experience. It was going to be my last concert, probably my last concert, at least for some time, here in Vietnam. And the pieces we chose were all about love. So I think that also indicated a little bit what I was trying to say with the pieces. That it was a representation of my love for Vietnam.
Yes. Can you tell us the moments kind of running up to the preparation? How did you how was the process working with your colleagues, whom you have worked for many years?
Well, the process was the same as for any other concert that we do. Last night's concert was also quite special because most of the pieces that I suggested were not solo pieces where one singer sings together with the orchestra, but where two singers sing, or even three, or the final piece that we did was actually six singers singing, all with their own part, but singing together. And that's very challenging for any singer. There were, I think, a couple of pieces, as far as I know, were being performed last night for the first time. I performed, one of them was the Die Tote Stadt by Korngold, and it's a beautiful duo about a man who has actually lost his wife, and then meets a girl who reminds him of his wife. I actually performed that piece in Ho Chi Minh City about 15 years ago now.
Wow.
So it was a very special piece for me too, because it's the first time we've performed it again. And as far as I know, I may be wrong, but the last piece that we did was a sextet, which means 6 solo singers on the stage, also with the choir chorus in the background, and of course the orchestra. It was the sextet from Lucia de Lammermoor, and I think that was the first time that was performed in Hanoi, and it was the first time that I've performed it, certainly
that you've performed
in Vietnam.
Yes. I believe that, you know, even though it was a very emotional performance, it ended even on a higher note, and that was the orchestra decided to give an impromptu performance in honor of you, performing Hallelujah, the chorus from Handel's Messiah.
That's right.
And that's, you know, how did you feel upon realizing that this surprise?
Of course, I was very surprised. It was an impromptu performance presented as an encore, and I think it was not just the orchestra and the chorus
as well
together who made an announcement to the audience, which I wasn't expecting, that this would be the last concert, and therefore they had prepared this piece, which they performed virtually without conductor.
How did you think the orchestra and the chorus did without your being the conductor?
Oh, I think they did very well. I would have done it a little bit slower than they did. They did it very quick. But no, it was wonderful, a wonderful piece, and it was a wonderful end to this period in my life. They all held up signs with the word "thank you" in different languages as well, which was also very, very touching.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, they presented me with flowers. I had to have almost 2 taxis to get home with all my flowers. Yeah.
Yes, very emotional.
It was a very, very emotional finale.
Yes. Now, Maestro Graham Sutcliffe is renowned in the Vietnamese music circle for programming concerts of consistent professional quality. In the following, we'll take an overview of some of his music in the following. How did you go from being an English teacher to kind of getting into the classical music scene or the music scene in Vietnam?
Teaching music is actually what I do. I studied music in the UK as a teacher, but when I came to Vietnam, I came essentially thinking I would be teaching English again, and then I got to Vietnam and discovered all this wonderful music. Even in those days, there was a lot. Well, I actually, the first time was in a restaurant.
Yes.
There were some people playing the violin in a restaurant, and they were really, really very, very good. And I was very surprised and went up to try to talk to them and asked them where they'd studied, and they told me about the Conservatory of Music. And so I asked if I could go to the conservatory, if they could help me to go there, and they did that, and I met the director of the Conservatory of Music, and we had a long chat, and I told him about my passion for music, and I was invited to go and play with because I played the violin.
Yes.
And I also did more conducting as well. I started conducting more.
I believe you got a group of people together, and then
a bit later, this was the final step.
Yes.
I got a group of people together, but that was outside of the conservatory,
Yes.
and we formed a small group of musicians, and that then became an orchestra, and we started performing in Ho Chi Minh City on a regular basis, about once a month, in fact, for about 3 years.
Wow,
in Ho Chi Minh City. And then the City Symphony Orchestra was also formed, and I was invited to play with with
also
them
the violin.
as actually a viola player. Because I play viola as well.
Yes.
And so I was one of the founding members, if you like, of the Ho Chi Minh City Symphony Orchestra, which is still playing now.
Yes. You've been with the classical music scene here in Vietnam since, we could say, the first days. How have you seen this field develop in Vietnam?
I think there's been a huge development. Just talking about Hanoi, over the last 10 years, if you look at the opera and ballet world,
yes.
When I first came, the opera company had done very, very few full operas, staged operas with costume and scenery. They've done some, often with overseas soloists. So the main characters in the opera are sung by foreigners, and the chorus, the orchestra maybe, and the stage work is done on the Vietnamese side. Now that's changed. And I think we've begun to change that quite recently. We've done not many, but a few operas over the last couple of years where everybody has been Vietnamese, except me.
How do you see the audience scene change after 23 years?
Well, I think there are large numbers of I mean, in Hanoi now, there are so many people who are very, very interested, and quite young people. It's not all old people like me. Who are interested in classical music. There's no country, or very few countries in the world, I think, where there are large numbers of people interested in classical music. Classical music is quite a minority niche interest for people.
Yes.
So it's not really different in Vietnam if you say there are not many people who enjoy it, but it's an important niche. It has to be there.
Let's talk a little bit about the opera. It's something that you have helped to contribute to, popularizing here in Vietnam. Can you elaborate on your decision of helping to bring opera to the country?
I think it's important for every country to have this culture, this aspect of culture. If you look at the other countries in Asia, look at Japan, look at Korea, Singapore, they all have a very strong Western classical tradition. Of course, they also have a strong local tradition as well, and I don't think the local culture has suffered because Western music has come to their countries. If you think of all the pop music, that's pop music in Vietnam, written by Vietnamese composers, sung by Vietnamese singers, is using the Western harmonic system. So it's essentially, it has influences of traditional Vietnamese culture. So I don't know what that tells us. There's something about the Western system that is appealing.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the current opera singers, which you have worked with in Vietnam, how do you assess their skills, and what it is that they need to improve on in order to better sing opera pieces?
Well, again, I think this goes back to the progress that we have made. I think even though they haven't learnt Italian, they've been able to sing whole operas in Italian. Of course, in singing in Italian, it's very difficult to know what you're singing about. Sometimes the music is a little bit deceptive. You sound as if you're singing a love song and you love the person. There was one example last night when one of our singers is singing a beautiful love song, and the guy she's in love with is Samson and Delilah. It's a very famous story. She's singing, but actually she's going to kill him. It's all a trick.
Yes.
But she has to understand that, because that will affect a little bit the way she sings and acts in particular. And he has to be completely unaware, because he's totally in love with her. But if they have no idea about the words or about the context of the song they're singing, it's not as effective as it should be. So we are very. I try to be as thorough as I can in preparing the content of the songs when we sing them.
Exactly.
With such a strong bond between conductor Graham and the Vietnamese instrumentalist, his leaving is a huge loss to every member of the Vietnam National Opera and Ballet. Mrs. Ngoc has worked with Graham for more than 10 years, and she appreciates what this English musician has done for her in the symphony orchestra.
Công việc của tôi là thổi O31, tức là đảm nhiệm những cái phần mà có phần solo. Thì tất nhiên là cũng gặp những cái câu rất là khó, và thị tấu ngay lập tức thì nhiều khi là mình cũng bị sai hoặc là bị gì đấy, thì anh ấy không bao giờ là tạo áp lực cho mình để mình phải căng thẳng mà không làm được công việc của mình, mà lúc nào anh ấy cũng rất là nhẹ nhàng và cũng chu đáo, rồi có thể là tập riêng. Thế nhưng mà để cho mọi người có thể là tốt hơn công việc của mình, không bị căng thẳng.
2, 3, chú lông lông. Đúng rồi. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
With his own enthusiasm for music and great love for life in Vietnam, Graham inspires everyone he meets. He has left deep impressions both as a talented conductor and as a close friend.
Những cái năm tháng mà gắn bó với nhau, cùng làm việc với nhau, thì ngoài cái tình cảm, cái trách nhiệm ở trong công việc, thì chúng tôi cũng là những cái người bạn ở bên ngoài cuộc sống đối với nhau. Tất cả mọi chuyện vui buồn chúng tôi đều có thể chia sẻ với nhau.
Graham thì rất hợp với phong cách của những cái nhạc công Việt Nam. Anh cũng đã ở đây lâu và anh hiểu được tâm tư nguyện vọng của từng nhạc công một ở trong dàn nhạc. Đấy là cái điểm mạnh của anh ấy.
After a 23-year journey through classical music in Vietnam, Graham finally has to return to his home country. But forever in the heart of the Vietnamese musicians, the image of a hard-working artist, a person they call friend, will never fade.
Do you remember the first concert you conducted here in Vietnam?
Oh yes, yes. The first one we did in Ho Chi Minh City with the group that I formed, and it was not at the Opera House, of course. The first one was relatively small. It was with a relatively small group of about 25 musicians, and we started with an early piece, Handel, the Arrival of the Queen of Sheba, with two soloists, two solo oboes, and that was quite unusual to have wind together with strings. In those days,
Okay.
there were quite a few concerts just with strings.
Yes.
The level of the string players in those days was, I think it's true to say, was a little bit higher
Than the wind.
than the wind.
Yes.
That's always been a problem here. It's getting better. So I put two oboes as soloists in that first piece, and I think that was quite a for me certainly a milestone.
Yes, a milestone, of course. It was the first time you conducted in Vietnam, and then from then
Yes.
on, you become
And a full house.
Yes.
You know, we sold all the tickets. We sold tickets. We didn't make a huge amount of money, but there was enough to pay everybody a little bit in the orchestra, just a small amount, and it was a very special occasion for me.
You mentioned that as a milestone. Let's talk about some of the other memories you've had working with the orchestral and also chorus scene here in Vietnam. What are some of the memories that stick to mind? So now there must be so many, but
There are many.
If,
yes.
if you, at the top of your head.
So I'll give you a few examples. I was once performing a piece that needed two pianos, and we were performing it in a school. The school didn't have any pianos, so we needed to transport two pianos from a shop to the school. We had very little money, so we didn't have enough to rent a lorry. So we put two pianos on a cyclo. Well, I think it was two cyclos actually, but still, a piano on a cyclo, just imagine it. Everybody here, of course, travels by motorbike, but imagine what do you do if you're a double bass player and you have to go to a rehearsal with your double bass? Well, of course, in Vietnam, it's no problem. You ride your motorbike and you carry the double bass somehow, somewhere, and it works. There are many examples. Maybe a final example would be we're performing a whole opera. The place for the orchestra in the Opera House, the pit, is actually only designed for a small orchestra of about 30, but we squash 60 people in there, and we are able to perform the opera. All this is, I think, only possible in Vietnam.
In the previous clip, we've just seen the extract of Du Kích Sông Thao. Can you share with us the preparation for this Vietnamese composition?
I feel I'm very lucky to have made acquaintance with quite a number of Vietnamese composers, including Do Hom Quân.
Yes.
Do Hom Quân, of course, is Do Nhuen's son. Who wrote Du Kích Sông Thao.
Yes.
And we've talked about that. I've talked to also members of the course to make sure that I understand where that piece is coming from.
Now, in terms of the Vietnamese compositions that you've worked with, other than Du Kích Sông Thao by Do Nhuen, there is also Chim Ưng by Đàm Linh, Mở Đất, and Rhapsody Vietnam by Do Hom Quân. What do you think of working with Vietnamese compositions? Is there a particular piece that you hold close to your heart?
I love conducting Vietnamese music because I like to. I can see very clearly, I think, how the two cultures often come together, because I can see that composers are very interested in bringing Western system together with the influence of Vietnamese traditional music. So I know some of Do Hom Quân music uses a lot of the rhythms, which are very special from Tây Nguyên. And you can hear that, which you don't normally get in classical music. So that's a very, very unique feature of some of the music. And of course, my teacher, one of the first Vietnamese composers that I conducted, was some of the very clever pieces. I used to think, I do think, by my teacher Quang Hai, who died just last year. He has a strong Western influence. But he performed some very unusual works, which are actually very funny. And there's a little bit of jazz in there, and usually for some quite unusual instruments. So we performed his xylophone concerto. He does a lot of concertos for traditional Vietnamese. He's written concertos for traditional Vietnamese instruments, like the Dan Chan, the Dan Nguyệt, which is accompanied by the Western orchestra.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed playing those pieces too.
Today, Graham is going to meet some friends of his. This will be one of his last chances to hang out with them before returning to England. Though some of these artists have not worked with Graham for years, they still want to come and say goodbye. Sharing a passion for music with Graham is an experience that they will never forget.
Thực ra thì em đã rời khỏi nhà hát cũng một thời gian, nhưng mà vì tình cảm anh em quý mến nhau nên là vẫn giữ liên lạc và thỉnh thoảng vẫn gặp nhau. Cái vở đầu tiên là vở em cộng tác với anh Rem là vở Pagliacci, và cái vở cuối cùng mà em được cộng tác với anh Rem là vở Carmen. Chắc chắn là em sẽ luôn cổ vũ và cho những cái vở mà anh Rem làm việc.
Ngoài những cái công việc mà hàng ngày làm ở nhà hát thì các anh chị em trong đoàn còn cùng nhau đi ăn, cùng nhau đi chơi. Nói chung là rất nhiều kỷ niệm với anh Hầm. Nếu mà anh ấy về thì bọn em rất là tiếc.
Every party must come to an end. Soon, Graham and these friends will have to part. But the bond in music and life will keep their souls close, no matter how big the geographical distance between them.
Now let's talk more about your life here in Vietnam. Outside of being in the concert hall and working with the musicians, how have you adapted to life in Vietnam? You've been here for 23 years, and in the past report people, your friends have said you're basically Vietnamese.
Yes, well, I feel very comfortable in Vietnam. Of course, when we say Vietnam, Vietnam that I came to 23 years ago is different from the Vietnam today. I just feel very, very at home here. I feel very, very happy here.
Any challenge in adapting in the first days and the cultural shock, perhaps?
I would like to think that I'm a very open person. I'm very interested in different cultures. So maybe slightly less of a challenge for me, I hope, than some other people. I love the food.
Yes.
I could eat Vietnamese food forever.
Yes. Well, while we're on the subject of food, unrelated, of course, but many of your friends have noted your wonderful skills in speaking Vietnamese. So, ông có thể chia sẻ một chút là ông đã học tiếng Việt ở đâu?
Tôi học tiếng Việt ở thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, trường Đại học Tổng hợp. Bây giờ là trường Đại học Xã hội và Nhân văn.
Nhưng có lẽ là ông đã ở ngoài Hà Nội đủ lâu để có giọng Bắc rồi. Đi ra ngoài này thì ông cảm thấy sống ở ngoài Hà Nội này thì ông có nhắc là ông rất là yêu thích đồ ăn Việt Nam, thì là có những đồ ăn nào mà ông yêu thích nhất?
Tuần trước tôi đi ăn chả cá với một số người bạn trong gia nhạc, trong hợp xướng. Sau đó mình có một cái liên hoan nữa để chia tay với tôi. Mình ăn lẩu dê rất là ngon.
Lẩu dê,
bún đậu, mắm
tôm,
thật lắm.
Ông ăn được cả mắm tôm là rất là giỏi rồi. Tôi nghĩ rằng là những người bạn ở Anh của ông sẽ rất là ngạc nhiên, và đặc biệt là những người Việt mà sống ở Anh nữa sẽ rất là ngạc nhiên khi mà được nói chuyện với ông, cũng như là được ông chia sẻ là thích ăn lẩu dê và bún đậu mắm tôm. Yes, that's wonderful. You speak wonderful Vietnamese. There's actually one phrase that the Vietnam National Opera and Ballet associate with you. It goes "nhìn chỉ huy." Can you elaborate on that?
That's probably a translation of a phrase from another conductor.
Yes.
A very wonderful Japanese conductor who used to work with the orchestra regularly, Mr. Fukumura, and his catchphrase, if you like, was "Look at me." Look at me.
Yes.
See? So I think the Nhìn Chi Huy
yes.
is probably
look at the conductor.
Of course, the musicians must look at the conductor.
Yes.
I always say they have to have two eyes, but the two eyes have to work independently. Yeah. One eye looks at the music, and one eye looks at the composer. And but they have to. That's the purpose of the conductor.
The first time I came to Hanoi in 93 or 94, it was very quiet. In those days, there were no cars, just a lot of bicycles. I was quite surprised at how quiet the city of Hanoi seems to be. "51 Trần Hưng Đạo is the headquarters of several associations, the Musician Association and the Film and Theater Associations as well. I often went to 51 Trần Hưng Đạo to talk to the head of the associations about the projects that we had in mind. The Hanoi Opera House is the place that I will remember the most for the rest of my life. It's very meaningful to conduct there, to stand there with so many famous people. It has been a very great experience. I have lived in Vietnam longer than any other place in my life, including England. Now I have been in Vietnam for 23 years, so it's a very important part of my life. It has changed me, and I'm sure I will never be the same for it. So it has influenced me a great deal.
Now, going back to the UK and perhaps any other place that you would visit in the future, if anyone asks you about Vietnam, what would be the first words that come to mind that you would tell them?
Creativity. I have met so many very, very creative people in many areas of the arts, not only music, but with my work with the British Council, I met many artists, I met many sculptors, I meet writers, I've met the composers, I've met singers, yes. And they all bring something of their own to the music.
Yes, creativity. Do you find that being here for so long, you've said this is one of the countries that, you know, you've been here the longest in any one country. Vietnam is the one, and many of your friends have said you're basically Vietnamese at heart. Do you find that to be true, or at some point, you know, a part of Vietnam is with you?
Well, I think I've taken on a little bit of a few of the Vietnamese values, not entirely. But now, I mean, the reason I'm going back is because of my family, essentially. There are other reasons, but that's one of the big reasons, and I feel maybe that's a little bit of my Vietnamese coming through a little bit. Yes. That I feel a very strong bond now that with my mum, because I know she's alone, and feel I need to be with her, and I see, of course, that every day in Vietnam. That the families are much closer.
Yes, one of the important Vietnamese values. Now, you've mentioned once, or maybe many times, that there's nowhere like Vietnam. What will you miss the most here?
What will I miss the most? I miss the food, of course. Even though there is a bit of Vietnamese food in the UK, but it doesn't taste the same in London. It tastes a bit different, but. No, I just think I will miss the vibrancy of Vietnam. Vietnam is a very young country. I don't know what the percentage is these days, if it's 50 or even more these days of people. Or the population of Vietnam, is it 50% are under 30 years of age, maybe more. And that makes Vietnam a very, very young country, a very active country. Everybody is always doing something. They're always busy. They never sit down. They never, and that's very different from where I come from. I will miss that because I've learned to enjoy that. This activity, this energy. It's a very energetic place.
Yes.
And people, I think, are generally quite optimistic in Vietnam at the moment. If you look around the world, if you go to England, that's one of the things I'm dreading most about going home, to be honest. They're very pessimistic at the moment about the economy. It's all getting worse, and it's very difficult to live, and how can we afford this? But it's always like that. It goes in waves. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But in Vietnam, it's going up. It's getting better, and it's been getting better for the last 20 years, I think. And so that shows in the people. It shows in people's faces. And of course, life is still very difficult for some people in Vietnam. I know that, particularly for artists. Some of the poorest people, I think, are artists these days in Vietnam.
So what would you wish for those artists, and particularly for your colleagues, the musicians, the music teachers you've worked with, the ballet company?
I really hope that the Vietnam National Opera and Ballet becomes a very important organization, as I think the National Symphony Orchestra is becoming. As far as I know, even the National Symphony Orchestra, the salaries are very, very, very low. So I hope salaries will increase, and that the musicians and the artists can devote their lives entirely to the art, which I know most of them are very passionate about.
Watching at home now are many of your colleagues, your friends, both in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. If you can just talk to them right now. I mean, you're leaving very soon. What would you say to them?
I think the most important thing is to say thank you to to all my friends everywhere in Vietnam for giving me 23 wonderful years in Vietnam. I'm very, very passionate about music, and I hope that if just a little bit of that passion has also transferred to some of my Vietnamese friends, then I will be very happy, and I'm sure it has. I know a lot of their passion for music and also for life has transferred to me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Graham, for sharing your stories. And on behalf of the audience, I would like to thank you for your contribution to Vietnam's classical music, but also music scene in general here in Vietnam. And we hope that you know, as your friends have said, this is always your home, and you're always welcome back here to enjoy more and to meet your friends once again.
Thank you.
And all the best of luck in the UK.
Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our edition with Mr. Graham Sutcliffe, who has been a conductor and has devoted his past 23 years to contributing much of his time and efforts to the classical music scene here in Vietnam. We hope you have enjoyed this edition, and we'll see you more in the next edition of Talk Vietnam. Goodbye.